Truth, lies, shenanigans.
All right, Rob B. Election day is Tuesday.
Mm.
Tuesday in the U.S. You want to talk
I
about
voted
these
already.
midterm elections going on. So, Robbie, I'll
I
let you
make,
take it over.
Makes sense that the token Canadian is talking about the U.S. midterms.
Token
That's
I
awesome.
know.
Canadian.
Tuesday, November 8th is when the midterm elections are coming up, and during this midterm election year, all 435 seats in the House of Representatives and 35 of the 100 seats in the Senate are going to be contested. 39 state and territorial gubernatorial elections, as well as numerous other state and local elections, will also be contested. Of note, this is the first election that is affected by the redistricting that followed the 2020 census. It'll be interesting to see how things play out. The Democratic Party has held the majority in both the House and the Senate for the past 2 years, which has helped President Joe Biden pass laws that he wanted. But the Democrats hold that power over the Republicans by a really thin margin. We're talking just a few seats in both. So it's tight. You need to get out there and vote. Specifically, what I wanted to talk about is the impact of a Republican win in three key areas. If the Republicans won, the possible impact on abortion rights and restrictions, the January 6th inquiry would effectively be terminated. And if the Republicans win, there's also a greater possibility that election deniers would be running future elections. So I really want to get your take on these things because that's pretty epic.
Yeah, the election deniers. All right, why don't we start
Oof.
off with, let's start with Lizzie.
So when you say you want to get my take, what do you want to know? What do you want me to say?
Yeah.
What do you ask me?
Well,
'Cause I have a lot to say. I mean,
It's
this
a
is a
lot.
very
It's
broad
a
Right,
question.
lot.
right.
So I have a lot
You
to
left you
say.
left
It's
it
so
broad.
big.
Your question's so broad. There's so much to talk about.
I left it very broad because that's it. I mean,
Your
it's
opinion.
these are very big topics in your society at this point,
All
and
right, all right,
yeah, like I
let me go
really
ahead and
just
start it off. Let me go ahead and start off. So all right, let's first say Dems are basically going to lose the House at this point. I mean,
Yes.
there's a chance, but
Or
Dems, you know, but the reason is because Republican-led states tend to gerrymander the hell out of their districts, so that all their Democratic voters are lumped into like fewer districts, which means, for example, if your state gets 10 representatives, you lump the Democrats into two districts. How many Republican representatives does that leave? So you're looking at 8. So I mean, they've gerrymandered the hell out of their districts. So they're probably going to get the House. There's still a chance, but Dems do have a better chance to keep the Senate. Since it's harder to gerrymander the Senate. They have a better chance than keeping the House. I see your
they
face,
only
Lizzie,
have
but
they Senate only one voting right now. It's 50 in the Senate with Kamala Harris being the
Lizzie, we got you breaking up for
Kind of
some
cut up.
reason.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
yes.
So what I was saying was is that the Republicans only need one vote in the Senate to swing to break the 50-50 tie.
Right,
Right now it's 50-50 and Kamala is the deciding factor.
right.
And so all we need, all the Republicans need is just to get one of those votes to come over, and then that's it. We're done.
Yeah, yeah,
Um
but I mean,
and
again, it's more likely we're going to keep the Senate. I mean, if there's some key races, obviously, so we're looking at like Pennsylvania and Dr. Oz and John Fetterman, and then you're looking at Georgia, Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker. I mean, those are key races. So you know, oh, I noticed Kevin Thaxton online said we, meaning Dems, should be specified. Uh,
progressives or progressives or
Democrats.
progressives.
Democrat.
Democrats could keep I'm sorry, I, just to step in here. So I used to be one of those guys who just would vote for the best candidate, whether it be Democrat, Republican, whatever, best candidate. And, you know, after the Trump era, I just can't do that anymore, to be honest with
Mhm.
you. I just, the, the Trump era has changed the dynamic of the Republican Party to where I just can't support the party at all in any way, shape, or form. So when I say we, I do, I probably vote for independents in some cases, but it's very, very, very unlikely that I'll vote for any Republicans.
So when it comes to Republicans, we can basically expect immigration, I think like gun control, or no, we can expect immigration, religious rights, and like violent crimes. But with Democrats, we can expect the environment, healthcare, and gun control.
Yeah.
So I personally feel that the Republicans might take the House. I think Nebo said. I agree. And I just think, I mean, if we're talking about predictions, or if we're talking about what things will look like, I think that there will be a lot more protests coming. I feel like a lot of people are going to just feel restricted. I mean, I'm nervous. I'm honestly I'm gonna be honest. I feel like in this scenario I'm learning more than I am going to like state my opinion, because I'm still learning when it comes to politics and when it comes to my government. So
Yeah. And there's a lot to learn. I like
Mhm.
Mike Wolf's comment because I mentioned, it's harder to gerrymander the Senate, but he says the Senate can't be gerrymandered, but it's got built-in inequity. For example, Wyoming, with a population of 500,000, has the same number of senators as California, with 75 times the population. So that's very accurate. So
So let me reiterate again. The Senate, the Republicans in the Senate only need one state to flip.
mm,
So, I mean, it's likely that that's where we are going to see the change. And we're talking about there's
yeah.
6 states that are heavily contested, that are hot button states right now. Neo mentioned 2 of them, Georgia and Pennsylvania. We also have Michigan. We also have Arizona. We
yep.
also have Wisconsin and Nevada, right? All 6 of those states, Joe Biden, unprecedented, all 6 of those states were won by Joe Biden in 2020. And that's where you started to see the chatter from the Republicans about voter fraud, about election
Mhm.
fraud, about how the election was stolen. And so I
Hmm.
wouldn't be surprised if those idiots in Georgia voted for Herschel Walker, if they voted for Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania, if
Which is
Arizona
absolutely
flipped back
crazy to me.
to Republican. Like I would not be surprised, because you still have a lot of politicians in those states who are pushing this election fraud narrative.
Hmm.
And so it's going to be very, very tricky to see what the outcome is on Tuesday. But Rob, to get back to
Yeah,
where
it is.
like the idea that midterms aren't really important, where that comes from, I think that starts in schools, right? I think that starts, at the adolescent level. I don't think that we are teaching students, or even teaching, Americans as a whole, the importance
Mhm.
of debate and what that affords you. There are still a lot of some countries on this earth where people, not everyone is allowed or afforded the right to vote. Certain countries on this planet where women can't vote, where people of a certain color or economic background can't vote. And that's not necessarily the case here. But we're not teaching students the importance of voting. Not like you said, you mentioned this is a midterm election, which in my opinion, honestly, sets up the general election for president. And a lot of people just think, oh, well, I only vote in the general election for president. Well, no. So then you are forfeiting your right to have a say on which senator, which House person in the House of Representatives represents your state or your city, like Washington, D.C., who is going to be voting for the next Supreme Court justice, but also at the
Yep.
local
I was
level,
going to
your
say,
city
yep,
council people, the
yep.
people in your neighborhoods.
We're
And
talking
so
about
these things are
gerrymandering,
not
right?
being,
That's where it starts, the local elections, to prevent that
yeah.
gerrymandering that we were
100%.
discussing, where they're you gotta, the midterms are so in some cases more important than the general election for president. I mean, because this
That's
is
what I
where
was
it
talking
starts
about.
from.
Like the sheer number of seats that are up for grabs. This is a huge, huge election. I would
I mean,
almost dare
even
say that
if
it's more important than your last presidential election, because it can
I,
mean a total shift in power.
Yes.
for me, I believe it is, in a sense. And even if, let's say, for example, the shift or the way power is situated in Congress on Capitol Hill, we could still, have the numbers in Congress in the House of Representatives. But if we don't have the numbers in the Senate, then everything gets shut down. It means
Yep.
absolutely nothing. And so I know, you have crazy Lindsey Graham. What's his name? What's the turkey baster's name? What's his name?
McConnell, Mitch McConnell.
Turkey,
Mitch.
yeah, Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell is
Turkey
sitting back.
You know what's bad is I
He's
knew who you were talking about.
exactly
Yeah.
sorry. But Mitch the expletive. He's sitting back. and
Mitch
he's
McConnell. Mitch McConnell.
yeah, Mitch McConnell. He's sitting back and he's salivating at this, because then
Yeah.
if they take over, he will again be the House majority. He will be the Senate. I'm sorry, the Senate majority leader, and which so these things are very important, but these lessons are not being taught to our students, to our citizens. I can't tell you the number of students I had. The last time I taught college students was in May 2021 at Howard University. And so those were 17, 18, and some 19-year-olds. And if they weren't eligible to vote in the 2020 election, their parents still were, right?
Mm-hmm.
So many of them talked about how voting wasn't a big thing in their households. They don't know if their parents voted. They didn't vote if they were 18 years old. And it was really shocking to me because once I became 18, I voted through via absentee ballot because I was in Finland. But I just felt that's what made me feel like I was an adult and I could start to contribute to society. Not turning 21 and being able to drink, but being able to vote for the first time. And these issues, these lessons are not being taught to Americans anymore.
Yeah.
So I
That's
think we
very
need to
true.
get back to the roots. We need to get back to the roots and make people understand the importance of democracy, of voting rights, and getting out there to vote. Otherwise, I have nothing to say to you. If you didn't vote and then you come after the election and you complain about a whole bunch of bullshit, shut up.
Yeah.
Shut it. Shut it.
I agree.
Shut it.
And then Kevin Thaxton says, and the laws in your state and city. That's another thing to consider is the laws. So, like, for example, when we're talking about abortion rights, those are actually on a lot of ballots this year. So that's why it's another reason you've got to get out. And because now that the Supreme Court has decided to make it basically a state issue, the states are now deciding the laws and the rights for people with abortions. So now you've got to get those people in there, and you've got to start getting the people. That's why some states have laws where you can have abortions or have rights, human rights, women rights, and there are some states where there are no women's rights or human rights. It's because of local elections. And then he also said, "Go ahead."
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, he also said if Georgia elects Herschel Walker, the entire state needs to be deported.
Don't send them north. Do not send them north.
There's so many.
The Herschel Walker
There's
thing is
so
crazy to me.
There's so many like anti-Herschel Walker commercials that come on in Georgia, like Herschel Walker is for abortion. Yes, so like flooded. There's so many. So I would be surprised if he actually did win.
It's neck and neck, though. I mean, your people in
Yes.
Georgia are crazy.
Yes.
I mean, there's no reason. This guy is pro-life, but then he has a bunch of exes saying that he paid for abortion. They've also said that he was abusive. I mean, what in the hell?
Disgusting.
Abusive. He has children outside of his marriages that he really has nothing to do with. That he hasn't met
all
before,
of the values that
barely
they
pays
claim.
child support for, and he's not in terms of his cognitive skills.
Right.
I'm being nice when I say that.
You are being kind.
He's not very bright. There's some mental health issues that he has admitted to, but also, like Neo brought up, he also has a very violent side. He's also a liar, but like Trump, he's been caught in so many lies. The Republic seems to that's an issue. So yeah, I would not be surprised if Herschel Walker won that race. Unfortunately, would not be surprised.
I wouldn't be surprised, unfortunately, either. So there's a few comments online because
Kevin's killing me tonight.
I know, right? Kevin's on a roll. But did you have any last things, Johnny, that you wanted to say? Or actually,
Not
we
necessarily.
didn't get Rob say anything, respond to his
Yeah,
own
that's
question.
true.
Really, the biggest fear for me is that if the Republicans were to win and you have election deniers who now are in control of the decision making, they have the ability to effectively undermine future elections and destroy the US democratic process. That, from the outside looking in, that's terrifying because they've been so radicalized. Neil, like you were saying, historically, you've been able to vote for who you thought was the better candidate, but because of how it's been radicalized, you can't really make that decision. It needs to be an ethical decision for everybody, for the greater good.
Yeah.
I agree.
All right. So these comments online. Adeboyega, the state, city, county, and school board elections are just as important as the federal elections.
Yes.
Um, were you gonna say something,
Like
Lizzie?
city council meetings.
It's a little bit long-winded, but it has to do with also Washington D.C. as a city
Oh yeah.
and
So
D.C.
Mike Wolf
statehood.
said, "Who are you guys who live in D.C. going to vote for in the Senate election?"
I'm not going to give the finger because I love you.
You're
Have tried.
breaking up there again, Lizzie. I'm sorry. It's hard to hear you. Um,
Yeah,
Can you
just a
hear me
little.
now?
okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now? I just said, with that joke from Mike Wolf, ha 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 ha. I'm not going to give him the finger. But yes, we do not have a vote for any senator in Washington, D.C., because D.C. is not a state. Therefore, there are no
Not a state.
senators here. But one of the things that's very important, and we saw how it affected January 6th, is that because DC is not a state, we do not have the power to govern what happens in DC. So the mayor of DC, Muriel Browser, she couldn't call in the National Guard. There's no governor for Washington, DC. So everything runs through the White House and the president. And of course, we now know that he said no in the beginning. No, don't send the National Guard there. No, they're fine. It's going to happen. They're fine. So that's why DC statehood is important. And the Republicans do not want DC to become the 51st state.
Of course
And so
not.
that's
Wow.
another issue that is on the table. So
Of course not,
there's a
because
lot going
it's
on.
primarily Democratic.
Wow.
So
Mhm.
that'd be two
Deep.
more Democratic representatives in the Senate.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
Robin Johnson says voting is important down the line from local to national. My child just mentioned how she gets to vote next year. Asked
Good
if
for
I
her.
voted, and I was like, absolutely. So
Ah.
Yeah, I
That's
voted. I
awesome.
voted early. You guys can see I got my sticker. I voted early. So yeah.
yeah, I'm voting on election
Yes.
day. So I'm
Same.
traditionalist, being a traditionalist this year. All right. Is this truth,
Traditionalist.
lies, or
Shenanigans.
shenanigans?
It's the
The
sad
old-fashioned
truth.
way.
It
It's the
ranks
Oh,
well on the
cool,
sad
truth
Rob.
meter. It
I got
ranks
truth.
well on the
Rob,
truth
that's
meter.
cool.
I didn't
And
see
there's a
it.
lot of liars
Wow.
like Herschel Walker out there. So.
Truth.
It's
I
the
like
sad
yours,
truth
Rob.
that
Mehmet Oz.
these people aren't paying attention. People aren't in tune. People are not doing their civic duty in this country. And it pisses me off. It
Yeah.
pisses me off.
It's gotten better, but it is still sad. You're right, Liz. It's still sad.
All right. Well, you got more to talk about on these elections, Lizzie.